Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about food addiction and finding sobriety in a food-centric world. I want to again remind people, I feel like everything on my page is very, this is what I did, this is not necessarily what you need to do. And that is a key because you are an important player. I could tell you all the things that worked for me, and I can guarantee, because people have done it, you could, if you wanted to, give me a reason why you can't. There's a reason why you can't cook separate meals for you or your family. There's a reason why you can't exercise regularly. There's a reason why you can't do all the things I did, and that's fine. That's why this is my journey. But I also feel like for every person who tells me why they can't do one of the things that I feel like were vital in my weight loss, there are 5 to 10 people who are like, ooh, that's a good idea. So I put it out there for those people. And by all means, people are losing weight in 1,000 different ways. So this is not the only way. For me, it was the only way. And I identify as a food addict. And we're going to talk about that and about finding sobriety in a food-centric world, because we do have like food, and the availability of it is everywhere. You are bombarded with commercials of it. It is illegal to put commercials of cigarettes with cool type characters during children's, programming and all this other stuff, and you need to watch how you do it. But you can have cartoon characters, in between every commercial of a kid's program and before a movie starts, pushing junk food and fast food. And there's just a lot of those types of allowances for food that they would never be made for other drugs and alcohol. Not to mention the availability of food. I mean, everywhere you go, there's going to be a McDonald's, a Taco Bell, in 6 other places right in a row, just waiting. So when you start off seeking sobriety, if you identify as a food addict and you start off seeking sobriety, you need to look at your trigger foods. And this is the time where only you can do this. I could tell you my trigger foods, but they might not be at all for you. And other people have trigger foods where I'm like, no, that does not make any sense to me. But they are your trigger foods. This is also the time where you can be your own worst enemy if you leave something off that list. When you are starting to sit down and you go, okay, well, I probably shouldn't eat, for instance, fast food. I do not eat fast food hamburgers or sandwiches. I just don't. I mean, Subway doesn't count, but burgers and stuff. However, I will have fries. What I do is when everybody else gets orders, I get 3 fries from everybody or whatever. There's been times when I've planned a small order of fries with the chili from Wendy's. Fries don't bother me, but the sandwiches do. And when I put that defining line down, if French fries were one of my trigger foods, but I would have been, in the back of your mind, you go, that's too hard. I don't want to give that up. So I'll give up sandwiches, but keep fries. If you do something like that with yourself, if you say, sugar is my actual addiction, but I can't give up all sugar, so I'll give up chocolate and keep other candy because I have to have it, you are setting yourself up to fail, to let yourself down, to give in to your addiction. That is like an alcoholic saying, oh, well, I can have beer, I just can't have a shot. Well, when you're sitting in the bar and you're having your beers and you're 6 beers in and your inhibitions are lowered, and somebody says, oh, here's a shot, that's when it's like, well, I had to take it because somebody bought it. Okay, do you see? Okay. So you have to set clear boundaries and be honest. This can be hard because sometimes you think you are being honest and then you realize as you're in your journey, other foods are triggering. sometimes trigger foods change. I know that hamburgers are still a trigger food, but through this journey, there have been other foods that have popped up and been a momentary problem. That is part of a really hard process that you have to go through. The next thing I'm going to say is a big one for me. You have to commit to it. You can't let yourself off the hook because you slip. You can't start over tomorrow. You can't, you have to commit to it. What I did was eliminate all problems. Trigger foods plus all the little shaggy ends that could be trigger foods, candy, crap, stuff, all of those little things around it. I got rid of them all. And I was very, very strict for months. There's the next thing. I would say a minimum of 3 months, but I would actually push you to do 6 months of getting rid of all of that. Because when you get really, like, you go through the withdrawals and you go through, which, seriously, there are chemicals in these foods that we're eating every day. It is a withdrawal. You go through the mental hunger, you go through the physical hunger, figuring out what that actually is. You go through all of those things, the anger, the hurt. Then what winds up happening is around 2 to 3 months, the emotions that you were eating away and that you were hiding and shoving down deep start to come up. And so if you allow yourself at 3 months to just start like experimenting with food, you are likely to encounter a problem food and a problem emotion at the same time. But if around 3 months where you are now not obsessed with avoiding foods because you're used to it, and you're starting to open yourself to anger, fear, resentment, all of those things that you normally eat away, and you're starting to find other ways of dealing with them, then you go for another 3 months of getting those other ways of dealing with emotions in. And that way you're much better off when you do start to introduce the foods that are not necessarily trigger foods, but are dangerous foods. And being in the right place to introduce those back into your diet is so important. That is probably the biggest thing. I am a loud supporter of tracking. And this is because you have to know what you're eating and to be accountable to it. That way at the end of the day, you're not like, but I'm hungry, so I must not have eaten that much of that or whatever. You have to know what you're eating. And writing it down makes it real, like spending cash versus using a credit card. Writing it down makes it real and makes it tangible and almost makes you full again. Because you're like, I did eat that. That is true, you know? I, again, am going to tell you, people complain about tracking left and right. If you can't do it on your phone, if you do it in a notebook, whatever you do, write it down. And do not let yourself be like, well, I'm going to write it on a napkin. I'm going to write it on a piece of paper. I'm going to write it on like all these thousands of different little things. And then you wind up like with 16 receipts at the end of the day and it's like, whatever. No, that's just another way of not really tracking. If you're going to do 1 sheet of paper a day, then that same sheet of paper. My family had to get used to the fact that I needed my book in my hand before I ate. And at first, they would be like, oh, do you have to have it? Can you write it down later? Look, just write on this and later on. And towards the end, or like now, the kids understood that in the banana, if I said, I can't find my book, we can't eat, they all got up and looked for it. Because it was like, well, we want to eat, and we're not even going to tell you to eat it later, to write it later, because we know you won't. And it's a hard transition in the beginning. But if you stick to it, it is not a hard habit to make. Now, if you do this whole, oh, I'm going to track during the week but not on the weekends, you're screwing yourself. You're doing 5 days worth of work and then undoing it in 2 days. And then 5 days worth of work and then undoing it in 2 days. And it's just, you're just screwing yourself. It's only going to stay hard or, whatever. But if you commit to it and you just do it and you do it nonstop, it becomes a habit and it becomes easy, breathable, doable, completely within reason. Measure your foods. This is fun for several reasons. One, the more you measure your foods, the better you are at estimating actual foods. And you're no longer just guesstimating, well, I'll call that a cup. Sure, whatever, I'll eat that. No. You can say, that's either a cup or less. You know, and I'd always rather go to less than to more. So, you know, that's another thing. Once you do it, do that one for 2 months. 2 months straight, and you'll be really good at estimating. But it's important to revisit. Like, I always measure in my kitchen so that when I'm out, it's easier for me to guesstimate. Or estimate, not guesstimate. When you're guesstimating, you're just throwing numbers around. Estimating, you're doing an honest job at being right. Okay, so measuring food. The other reason that's fun is because sometimes you get more. Sometimes the cup versus the weight, you get more. Sometimes you get less. And that's a good learning experience because it'll be like, oh, this is only 100 calories for a cup. And then you figure out, and then it says like, 28 grams. And then you figure out that a cup is actually 38 grams. And it's like, wait a second. Paying attention to that, see? Okay. It's just a good learning experience. Measure, track, clear and concise. Yes. Okay. The next thing is, when it is an addiction, you cannot approach it like it's a diet. And you have to be verbal about that with the people around you. Maybe they're used to you going on diets, but you just figured out that you have a food addiction. So now you need to say, I am not on a diet. I am a food addict. And I have to change my whole approach to food. That's an important thing to do. Maybe what you need to do, not a maybe, is approach it differently. See, now here on YouTube and on other sites that I use, and I have said this before in these videos, there is this forgiving environment, and that's awesome. And people talk about, I've been working so hard, but then I went and blew it out the water and I gained a pound. And their friends and their community are so quick to say, that's great though, don't worry about that. Oh, it's a pound, it'll come right off. And that is true in so many, many aspects. But if the person identifies as a food addict, it is not about weight anymore. So if I got on here and I said, yeah, and I had a Burger King burger. It was not a big deal, and I'm up 1 pound, whatever. I hope that everybody who watches me would be like, red flag, what are you doing? You're no longer sober. Something is wrong. It would be the same as me getting on here and after being sober from a meth addiction for a year saying, well, I had a little bit of meth Friday night. That's huge. It's a big deal. So your sobriety is a big deal. It's no longer a diet you can start over tomorrow. Once you really and truly identify as a food addict, you need to realize that this is life-changing. It is life-changing. And you need to treat yourself like an addict. Now, as an addict, you have the addiction living inside of you. And it comes out in a hateful way. You're fat, you're ugly, you might as well fucking eat. And it comes out in a friendly way. Cake makes you feel better. Cake can't be wrong. Just have one piece of cake. It comes out in a neutral way. Well, that's just silly. You're never going to be able to stay on a diet your whole entire life. Why don't you just learn to eat normally? Why don't you just have one or a small portion of whatever? All of those things you need to realize and identify when they start. That is the addiction. And if you have people in your life who sound like your addiction, then you need to stop listening to them and stop going to them because they honestly don't get it. Okay, so I covered the having people in your life that get it, that understand addiction. Now, there's a couple of different ways to handle that. If you find that, maybe they don't understand, maybe they haven't dealt with addiction, maybe they don't get what exactly you're doing. There are many, many books on addiction. It doesn't have to be food specific. There are counselors. Again, they don't have to be food addict counselors. In fact, I find like Overeaters Anonymous and those kind of things, I didn't find that they were set up the way I needed them set up. I didn't find that they were, I don't know what the word is. I mean, like, I feel like the way to truly treat a food addiction is by putting it on par with other addictions. And I find that a lot of people that I have researched and that I've spoken to other people and that I have talked to counselors myself, I find that their approach to food addiction is different in that they're very wishy-washy. There is no shades of gray to alcoholism. If you are an alcoholic and you drink, you are not sober. There are no shades of gray to sobriety with drugs. If you're on drugs, you're not sober. And that there are no shades of gray with food addiction either. You can use the fact that you have to eat as a shades of gray excuse. You can use the fact that, like, food is legal and everywhere as a shades of gray excuse. But the truth is that when you give up the whole, well, that's kind of a gray area excuse, you have to hold yourself to a higher accountability. And that means hard work. And that means saying no. And that means not going to parties if it's a situation you can't handle. If you are an alcoholic and your best friend was having a wedding and there was alcohol everywhere, you would have to really soul search. Are you strong enough in your addiction to go and be surrounded by alcohol and people drinking and the availability of it? Now, here, in this situation, if you're an alcoholic, then people there who know are going to work extra hard to make sure that you stay sober. Now, as a food addict, you are your only resource because other people don't see it the same way. They see it as a diet and they start to think, well, I mean, like one piece of wedding cake, oh, if sugar's your thing, that's not one piece of wedding cake. That's a bullet in a gun. Or, oh, it's a little bit of pasta if pasta is your thing. You see what I'm saying? Like, you have to, but if you are an alcoholic, you would have to look at that situation and be realistic with yourself. And you would maybe miss weddings for the rest of your life. You would very possibly miss birthday parties, 50% of them. You would very possibly, like, not go to certain sporting events. This is all true and acceptable. But then when we talk about food addiction, people are like, well, I'm not going to skip going to dinner with my friends my whole entire life. Well, I'm not going to stop living and miss out on my cousin's birthday that, you know, they live 16 hours away and I can only see them once in a while. I'm not going to, and they have all these reasons. And basically it's, I'm not going to miss living life due to this diet. I'm not going to miss living life due to this lifestyle. If it's a diet and that's how you're approaching it, that's you. But if you are a food addict, you're not going to miss living life. What does that mean? Are you choosing your addiction? Is that the life you want to live? Because that's what happens. If you look at it as a food addiction and you go, I'm not going to miss living life, then you are choosing to live a life of addiction. And you are choosing to die early. Or to die agonizingly slow, losing limbs. Or to have multiple heart attacks. And to put that on your family to have to take care of you. You are choosing to put yourself in a horrible situation. And that's the truth. And people around you are going to hurt. And you are going to hurt. So that whole, I have to live my life, becomes, what life are you living? if it's an addiction, then you have complete permission to say, I'm not going to be at your wedding. I just can't be around cake. You know? You don't even, if you want to tell them you're an alcoholic, you can. I mean, people seem to be more okay with that than saying food addict. But, you know, if people who you love, everybody in my life now knows that I identify as a food addict. The end. I'll say it 16 times at a family gathering. I will say it as many times as I need to say it to be heard. And at first, they kind of like, but now it's like, okay, I'm not even going to try to approach this because she's going to say she's an addict and she's going to repeat the mantra she's been repeating for over a year. And so now it's like I have earned the respect. Now, what's fucked up is if I was drinking constantly, a sloppy, disgusting mess of a drunk, I would only have had to say I'm an alcoholic once for them to be like, you're right. You need to get on that. Good job fixing it. But I was totally the fat girl equivalent of sloppy drunk at every family get together. I was totally the fat girl equivalent of completely wasted everywhere I went and all the things I did, and my life showed it. And I have to tell you 1,000 million times that I'm a food addict for you to respect it and to start to support my choices. Pretty fucked up, but true. So you have it in you, and you might have to fight for it, and you might have to defend it, which is fucked up, and you might have to scream and holler, and you might find yourself doing a lot of this work alone, especially in the beginning, because people don't understand and they don't get it and they think you're just dieting again and blah blah blah. Okay, all of those things you might have to do, but when you identify yourself as an addict and you take yourself seriously and you put sobriety as a priority, then you make it happen. And honestly, in my life, my priorities are, and this is a really hard thing to say, I want to say that my kids are the most important thing to me. And on some level, that is true, but because that is true, my sobriety is more important than anything. Because I don't want to die early. I want to live well past 100. I don't want to set a bad example and have them be sick. I don't want to be a burden on them when they are older. I don't want to be sick in front of them. I don't want all the things that come with addiction. I don't want those behaviors to go into their addictions. All of that makes my sobriety a priority. So, if you really feel like it's an addiction, then your family should be fuel in your fire. And they might be hard to deal with because I will tell you, a lot of women in the Weight Watchers meetings and that I talk to about losing weight will say, well, my husband brings home donuts and my husband brings home brownies and I'll tell him I'm on a diet. How many times have you told him you were on a diet? And you know what his brain thinks? This is what his brain hears. That's great. That means this chick's going to be a bitch for 2 weeks while she pretends she's going to lose weight. And then she's going to wind up eating anyway. So I might as well bring home donuts, save myself the 2 weeks of bullshit, and get this over with so we can all be happy. They don't realize it's different until you show them that it is different. And you show them that it is different by fighting for yourself. Sobriety in a food-centric world is it's totally possible, but it's hard work and it's constant dedication. It does get easier. It does get more comfortable, but like any addiction, when you give it up, when you start to move towards health and sobriety, it is hard. It's uncomfortable. It's scary. It's big. It's daunting. It's worth it. You are worth it. Like, life is worth it. Your kids, your family, honestly, everything. And then you get the bonus of losing weight and being healthy and accomplishing amazing things. And I was like, honestly, health really was my reason. The size 6 jeans, the size, medium, small tops are just bonus. And they're a big, beautiful bonus, but it's just bonus. Sobriety is amazing. It's awakening. It's changing your entire mental awareness. And it is, if you are an addict, one of the biggest things you're going to accomplish. And that's amazing. And it gives you this sense of like, I can do anything. I can put my mind to it and do anything. I had shut myself down to such a point that I forgot the fire and the energy and the capability that I have. I forgot that I was a talented artist. I mean, I knew it, but I wasn't doing anything with it. I forgot that I can write. I knew that, but I wasn't doing anything with it. I am now making art. I am working on making music with a friend. I am working on poetry. I am teaching my children. I am multitasking. I am on YouTube talking. I am doing all kinds of things. I'm about to do a half marathon, run the Crescent City again. Like, there's so much going on, and it really is due to sobriety, because none of it would be happening without that. I am in a happy, fulfilling marriage due to sobriety, because honestly, I could not be who I am if I was not sober, and this marriage would not be what it is if I wasn't present and aware the way I am. All the amazing good things that are coming due to the sobriety, and that is immeasurable. And like, I thank God for it. And I think everybody who now respects it and helps it continue, because it just continues. That's another beautiful thing. It's hard at first, but it gets easier when you look back and go, there's, you know, like, it becomes like this. At first, it's hard. It's so easy to start tomorrow. It's so easy to start next week. It's so easy. But then 3 months in, it's like, but I have 3 months of sobriety. That's not 3 months of being on a diet waiting for a cheat day. That's 3 months of sobriety. And then it's 6 months. Am I really going to throw away everything I have going on? And all of the, like, the one thing that has made all of this happen and constant, am I going to throw that away for a cheeseburger? Am I going to throw that away for a downward spiral? In my moments of weakness, I think about how much time I have, how strong I am. And it's like, that gets easier. A year in, easier. A year and a half. You see what I'm saying? It builds, it mounts, it becomes your own platform for continuing. And it's really a beautiful thing. I will answer questions. I will talk to people. I just told Heather, I'm your beast. I will do that. I am like, that's what I'm about. And that's what I feel like everything needs to be about. And I'm going to bring this up in the January wrap-up video. But, like, you might notice on my like channel page, it says go hard or go home. I have a new theme song. My first theme song was more by Usher. That's how I got myself motivated. And in the you know, I'm a beast, I'm an animal, I'm that monster in the mirror, and I would just pump myself up every day and be like, that's it, I'm a beast. And I'm telling you, Heather, I will be your beast. Like, I will fucking fight for you, dude, because I believe in it. Okay. I totally have a new theme song, and it's the THE song, like, by will.i.am. I think that's got J-Lo in it. And it's, you know, it's like, you can go hard or you can go home. And that is my theme song now, because it's the truth. You can go hard or you can go home. And honestly, that's it. That's the choice. It's, what are you doing? Are you doing it or are you not? Because if you are, you can do it. That's the end.